All right, that's tight. We need maximum tension to keep this old girl stable. Leaving the mine behind, the wheel drawing Thomas has arrived at the workshop. Let the restoration. The rust here on the side tanks is extensive, but it's mostly surface deep. The underlying metal seems solid. First step is getting the pressure washer hooked up. This should help blast off some of the heavy grime. The handrail bolts were completely rusted over. Took some serious leverage, but we finally got them loose. These bolts are really putting up a fight. All right, got it. Wow, this thing's heavy. With a little leverage, this gauge should pop right out. Perfect. Another step closer to getting the cabin stripped down. All right, with those bolts finally loosened, we can start pulling the controls from the main panel. And with a little help from the impact wrench, the final fastener is out. Look at all that rust. Now for the heavy lifting. We need to document the corrosion on this side panel before we can treat it. Okay, that's the rear lamp secured. I'm just going to tag this as Thomas rear lamp so we don't lose track of it during the disassembly. And there we go. After all that effort, the threads finally broke free. Look at that corrosion inside. Applying some torque now. You can see the rust starting to break free, and it's off. We'll label this clearly. Thomas, the left drive rod. Keep everything organized. That took some serious torque, but we finally got the cover off. Now we can inspect the bearings underneath. As you can see, the hub is heavily corroded. We need to meticulously clean all this grease and rust before we can even assess the damage. We're putting about 50 tons of pressure on this hub right now. Listen to that creak, it's starting to give way. That took everything the puller had, but we finally got it. Listen to that pop. We are making progress now. And slowly down onto the stand. Perfect. One step closer to getting this engine running again. With a little more pressure, this wheel should finally break free from the axle taper. There we go. All right, with enough leverage, those rusted threads finally broke free. Now we can get this pipe off and inspect the boiler. And that's the main steam intake removed. I'll just tag this as engine A negative steam intake so we can keep track of it during restoration. Okay, making sure we label this clearly. This is the front left cylinder block. To tackle this boiler, we need the right gear. I'm setting up the torque wrenches, gasket trays, and inspection cameras before we start disassembly. All right, with the fasteners finally loose, we can carefully maneuver this heavy plate out of the way. This is a huge step forward. And finally, the baffle plate is clear. That was a lot harder than expected. The pitting and corrosion here is extensive. We'll need to meticulously remove the scale to see the true condition of the metal underneath. And with that final pull, the piston is free. Look at the state of these rings. We're one step closer to getting Thomas running again. And there it is. Look at the state of this valve here. We've got our work cut out for us, but this is a huge step forward. includes an environment. It includes the clanging and clinking of metal parts being handled, possibly being placed onto a work. These are the steam valve and cylinder rod. We're dropping them into the chemical bath now to strip away decades of rust. Look at that reaction. The electrolysis bath is really starting to work now. You can see the rust lifting right off the metal components. Now we're just using the air compressor to make sure every last drop of the chemical bath is dried off the piston and the valve assembly. Okay, first measurement here is coming in at 10.5 inches. Let's check the other end for taper wear. The surface is definitely uneven. We'll take a few measurements along the length to check for taper and decide if it's salvageable. The first step is to check the cylinder bore for trueness. We measure the diameter at the top, middle, and bottom. Okay, let's get the thickness on this valve seat. Looks like we're right at 0.250 inches. That's within tolerance. All right, comparing the bore measurements to the tolerances here. 12.01 inches is just over, but still acceptable for now. All right, the piston and the bore are too far gone. They'll need to be machined. But the valve and the rod, we can definitely reuse those after a good cleaning. Now we carefully wipe down the cylinder bore and end cover. Absolute cleanliness is essential for a proper seal. All right, the rod is through the packing. Now we use the large wrench to secure the connection tightly. We're starting the inspection of the main frame rails. As you can see, the rust is heavy, but we're tapping it to check for weak spots. Getting this first layer of gray primer on is crucial. We're doing nice, steady passes to ensure perfect adhesion before the glue goes on. All right, the paint is fully cured, ready for assembly. Just tightening the final bolts now. Hear that click? That means it's properly torqued. All right, now for the tricky part. We need to slide this axle right into the bearings and make sure it's perfectly centered before we secure it. All right, we're applying fresh oil to all the linkage points. This should ensure everything runs smoothly for the engine starts. All right, checking the main steam joints now. Everything is dry, no signs of leakage around the fittings. Looks good to go. And there we go, the oil drill breathes again. Gauges look good, system check is a success. The boiler pressure is holding steady and the valves are perfectly aligned. She runs like new. And with a slight adjustment to the regulator, we have full steam ahead. The rail test is a success. The old locomotive handled the curve perfectly, a truly satisfying moment for the restoration team.